In this astrologically historic month, everybody is talking about the Epstein Files. On February the 20th, we'll see the first Saturn and Neptune conjunction since 1989. And what we're watching unfolding before our eyes is the comprehensive deconstruction of the legitimacy of the current world order. But where is all this going? The US Justice Department still has another 3 million pages of Epstein-related materials held back. Are we going to see more? I think we might. In this short video, I'm going to try to answer some of these questions using astrology. This is World Astrology Report. I'm your host, Dan Waits, and welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. On January the 31st, 3 million Epstein files were publicly released by the US Department of Justice. There's some truly horrific stuff in those files, and I think the cumulative effect of them, if you've taken some time to soak them up, is pretty dismal. What it strongly suggests is that many of the worst fears of conspiracy theorists are actually absolutely true, that the world is run by an utterly amoral political and financial elite who are kept in line through the abuse of the vulnerable and through blackmail. There's an excellent article on this subject on the Middle East Eye website by Jonathan Cook entitled "The Criminal Elite Exposed in the Epstein Files Are Burying the Truth." It's subtitled, "A handful of figures will be sacrificed, but only to protect a wider culture that believes rules don't apply to the ruling elite." I'd encourage you to read that article because I think it sums up the situation very well. It's linked below. Anyway, I can't say that I get all my predictions right, but one of them from my February forecast really did land. In terms of mundane astrology, I think this full moon could bring some damaging news for Israel. Guess who I think is going to be back making headlines around this time? Yes, it's the dead sex criminal who just won't die. It may not even be dead anyway. Jeffrey Epstein. And the astrology behind that prediction was very simple. We have a natal chart for Jeffrey Epstein. It's timed for January the 20th of 1953 at 6:15 a.m. in Brooklyn, New York. And in his chart, his nodal axis is at 12 Leo and 12 Aquarius. The nodal axis is an extremely sensitive point in any chart. The full moon of February the 1st was at 13 Leo, and so it was very tightly configured to Epstein's north and south nodes. Full moons represent moments of revelation, and it seemed likely to me that the full moon would bring fresh revelations about Epstein. And indeed it did, because the Justice Department released 3 million files related to his legal cases just as the full moon was forming in the sky. The lunar nodes also represent connections with other people, and the story of the Epstein files is all about that theme, about who was connected to Epstein and what they did. A lot of people are trying to play down the significance of these files for various reasons. A lot of the revelations they contain are related to people we already know were connected to Epstein, of course. How about this one from Deepak Chopra? God is a construct, cute girls are real. What's also clear, if you spend some time on social media listening to what people are saying, is a sense of genuine disillusion about the West, about how it's really run and who is really in charge. And here we need to talk about something else going on in the skies now, the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, which happens every 36 years or so. These Saturn-Neptune conjunctions tend to bring a widespread sense of disillusion to the world. Our old false impressions of how it works are broken down. They're dissolved. As I said in my recent video on Venezuela and in my February forecast, it's become clear that the so-called rules-based international order is finished. It was always an illusion, but now Western leaders are just flat out admitting it. And I think this Epstein file release also reflects that same astrological dynamic. The current world order and the domination of the West has been thoroughly discredited in many people's eyes. Reading some of the depraved stuff in those files is depressing, but it's important to bear in mind that what we're seeing actually represents a degree of progress, because all of this terrible stuff was happening all along. The difference now is just that we know much more about it. And we can't build anything better without knowing the truth of things and shedding our naivety. And so there's also another factor that I want to bring to your attention about why this is happening now. And that's Pluto in Aquarius. If you're enjoying this video so far, then please do click the like button to register your support, and do also subscribe and enable notifications. And if you're looking for a consultation with me, I have some slots in March, so get them while they're hot. All right, there's an extremely plutonic smell in the air with the release of these files. Pluto represents the deep truth of things that's hidden beneath the surface. It also represents small groups of people and conspiracies. It represents the unseemly parts of reality that people would prefer to pretend doesn't exist. Pluto brings those things into visibility. As rough as Pluto's methods are, we tend to emerge from the Plutonic process more true to ourselves and ultimately more empowered. Think of Persephone and her journey to the underworld. Pluto is in Aquarius now, but what I found in my research is that the great stories of Pluto in Aquarius are continuations of things that begin with Pluto in Capricorn. I made a video about this very subject in June of 2024, and I'm going to excerpt from that video here because things I said back then are highly relevant to what's just happened with Epstein. The Pluto in Capricorn period also saw the Me Too movement and the exposure of things like Harvey Weinstein's abuses in Hollywood and Jeffrey Epstein's paedophile ring. What's remarkable about the Epstein case is that we know he ran a big operation over a long period of time, and we know that a lot of very powerful men were implicated. We know who was on his flight logs, who went to his island, but besides Epstein and his partner Ghislaine Maxwell, who's been punished for that? Nobody, with the possible exception of Prince Andrew, who took some reputational damage but has, of course, so far managed to stay out of jail. But I suspect things won't stay this way as Pluto moves through Aquarius. So I think this story is only just getting started. We may well be looking at the exposure of the methods of a widespread system of control operating to keep the highest levels of society in line, possibly at a global level. All right, before we go, we're going to consider where this could be going and the question of whether we're going to see even more from the Epstein files. To answer the question of where things might go with Epstein, we're going to go back to his natal chart. Transits to your sun can affect and potentially increase your fame and visibility, or your infamy. And yes, this even applies when you're already dead. One of those transits would have to be a trine from Uranus. And here's where this gets interesting, because Epstein had his sun at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Uranus is currently transitioning into the sign of Gemini, from where it will trine Epstein's sun. It's already made 2 exact trines. And there's an interesting story here, because these Uranus transits match almost perfectly the story of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which is the US law that has mandated the release of these files, which President Trump signed after being put under a lot of pressure to do so. The law was first introduced in the US House of Representatives on July the 15th of 2025, just a few days after the first exact trine of Uranus to Epstein's sun. It passed the House on November the 18th and the Senate on November the 19th of 2025, and it was signed into law by President Trump that same day. And that happened just after the second retrograde trine of Uranus to Epstein's sun. Uranus will make a third and final trine with Epstein's sun in late April of 2026, and the Department of Justice still has 3 million Epstein files that it hasn't released yet. The first batch were bad enough. You can only imagine that many of those held back must be much, much worse. We probably won't ever see all of them because they're keeping some of them back to protect victims, but also to protect national security, which seems to me to be a very easily abused principle. But certain US politicians are putting on the pressure to have more of those files released. And I think we could well see more of them coming out in April as that final trine comes into effect. So watch this space. All right, in the bonus section of this video, available for members of World Astrology Report, whether here on YouTube or at my website, worldastrologyreport.com, I'm going to talk about a related theme. Why is it that financial interests seem to run our world? And when did they take control? Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you again on the channel very soon.